Now I would like us to see in practice what we were talking about in the theory. Let's take a look on my screen. As you can see, I've prepared a simple project. All we have here in the body tag is an empty span tag as an inline element and an empty div tag as a block element. As you can see on our preview, they are not visible on our website since they're empty. But let's open our DevTools to check if they're actually there. Let's expand our Elements tab right here. And here we can see our body tag right here. And inside we have our span tag and our div tag. When I hover on the span tag right here, you can see in the corner its actual size on our website. And you can see it's 0 times 0. So as an empty inline element, the span tag has the 0 height and 0 width, which is determined by the auto value, which we know. But let's see it. Let's select our span tag. Go to the Computed tab right here. Let's scroll a little bit down. Here we have checked our Show All options. So we are going to see all the default values for this element. Let's check its height. And we can see its height is auto right here. And let's check its width. Let's scroll a little bit down. And we have the width property with the value of auto as well. So the inline elements take as much width and height as they need to display its content. And since we have no content in our span tag because it's empty, its auto height and auto width will be 0, as you can see on the monitor. Now let's check our div tag right here. You can see with the div tag is the same situation when it comes to the height of this element, because it's also auto by default. So it's going to be 0 since our element is empty at the moment. But you can see 942 pixels. And this is the value of its width, which is by default 100% of its parent. So in this case, it's 100% of the body tag of our document. And as we know by default, the body tag in the HTML file is practically the whole browser window without those 8 pixel margins that are set by the browser. So it's computed to 942 pixels. But when we get our browser window and expand it, if we select it once again, we can see now its width is 1285 pixels because it's always 100% of the parent, which is the body tag, which is practically the window of the browser, minus 8 pixel margin on each side. Let's check it out once again. I made the browser window smaller, and now we can see its width is 625 pixels. And as we can see, its height is still 0. Let's put it back once again how it was. Let's check it in the Computed tab. We have the width of our div. Let's check it. We can see it right here. The width property computed to 942 pixels. But we should keep in mind that's 100% of the parent element, just computed by the browser to 942 pixels. And let's check our height. And we can see it's 0 pixels because our element is empty. Now let's create a style tag in our document. And let's make a rule both for our span tag and our div tag. We can do it like this by typing many elements separated by a comma, like this. So here we have span. Let's get a div as well. And we can place styles both for our span tag and our p tag. Let's set it background color to, for example, catted blue. Let's also increase the font size of these elements. Let's say to 36 pixels. Let's save the changes to see what's gonna happen. As you can see, nothing actually happened on our website because our elements are still empty, so their height is still automatically 0, since they have no content to display. So let's give them a content. For a span tag, the span text. For the div tag, the div text. Now let's save our file. And this is the effect we will get. You can already see that they have both the same height, set in this case by the font size of the content of these elements. So they take up as much height as they need to display this content. But you can clearly see the difference at first glance when it comes to the width. As we can see, the span tag right here has the auto height, so only the height that it's needed to display the text inside. And it's the same situation with its width. It only gets as wide as it needs to display the text inside. When it comes to the div tag, we can see the height is also automatic and depends on the text inside. But as you can clearly see, its width is set to 100% of the parent, which is in this case the body tag, which is practically the whole browser window, except those little margins of the body tag with the value of 8 pixels, which you already perfectly know. Let's check these elements in our DevTools once again. Let's select the span element, and you can already see now it has 72 pixels of its height and 40 pixels of its width. Let's check it in the computed tab. Its height is still showed as auto, and this is the issue of the browsers, because different browsers displays those values differently. Because as you can see, this is the inline element and its height is presented in the computed tab as auto. But when we select our div element, which is a block element, its height is computed normally to 42 pixels. It's just the way it is, how the Chrome browser displays these values. In the other browsers, it might be showed differently. So let's go back to our span tag. We can see its height is auto, but we can see it's 40 pixels. Let's check its width. Right here. The browser says it's computed to auto as well, but we can see it's 72 pixels. Let's check the div tag. We can see in the corner it's 942 pixels, which is computed by the browser exactly as it is. And when it's come to its height, it's 42 pixels as we can see here, and 42 as we can see in the browser as well. And as we know, if we expand our browser window, it's always going to take 100%. So now it's 1433 pixels. And when we make it smaller, it's 484 pixels. So this is how this works. And this is the basic difference between the block element and the inline element. Now let's do something else. Let's delete these elements from our body and let us create 100 divs. How do you think? What's gonna happen? Let's create it. As we can see, we already have it in our document. Let's save our file. And we can clearly see they are not visible on our website. But we can see it. We can see all of them in a document object model. So we know they are there. But each of them has 0 height. So each of them is practically invisible. But what we can do is to set their height. Let's say for 1 pixel. Let's see the effect. And now we can see they are visible on our website with no problem. Let me get this more visible. When we select our div tools, They are here, and they have 1 pixel of their height, which maybe would be more visible if we place, for example, margin bottom by 1 pixel to separate our divs. Let me show this to you. Now you can see that 1 pixel of the line is our element and 1 pixel is the margin. We can clearly see this in our DevTools. Each 1 pixel line is our div, our single div, which has 1 pixel of its height and 100% of the body of its width, of course, minus those margins, which we can get rid of, resetting those margins. For the body tag, like this, margin 0, save our file, and now we can see that our each div starts exactly from the edge of the browser window and ends at the edge of the browser window, which is 100% of the body tag, which is 100% of the browser's window. Now let's get rid of those divs from here. Let's mark them, scroll a little bit down, delete them. Let's comment those styles for now. And let's create 100 span tags. Like this. You can already see the difference in the code editor. This is something that I told you in the theory. Block elements, even in the code editor, are placed one below other. And the inline elements are by default, even in the code editor, placed next to each other in one line. Let's save our file to see what's gonna happen. As you can see, nothing is visible in our website, even though we can see our span tags in the document object model, but we can clearly see each of them has 0 of its width and 0 of its height. Now let's see if the height property will work with it. Not the margin bottom, but we want the height. Let's make it like this. Save it. And nothing actually happens, even if we place 100 pixels of their height and 100 pixels of their width. As I said before, these properties won't work. So our span tags are still invisible on our website because it's impossible to set the height and the width of the inline element. But we can change that. Let's delete this width. Let's change the height once again to 1 pixel. Let's again add this margin bottom of 1 pixel. Save our file. As you can see, nothing changed because our span tags are inline. So the height of 1 pixel cannot be set. But as I said in the theory, we can change its display property from inline, which is set by default. So even if I save our file, nothing actually happens, because this value for this property is already set for this element. But let's say we want to make it block like this, and voila. Now our span tags behave exactly like our div tags, because now there are block elements. And this is what we usually do with the inline elements if we want to style them and have full control of them. We just simply transform them to the block elements, which can be made simply by changing the display property from inline value to the block value. Now I want to show you something else. I would like to create 10 span tags in my body tag, and I'm gonna show you a shortcut of building such a structure. What I want is to create a span times 10, which you should already know. It's gonna give me 10 span tags. But that's not everything I want from this shortcut. When we place curly brackets, creating this shortcut, we can place a text inside it that would be placed in our elements. Now if we hit enter, we can see we have spans with the text span inside, but that's not everything I wanted to show you. We can use a $sign inside our curly brackets. Then our text inside will be numerical, like this. It's generated automatically from 1, but let's undo these changes. We can place $sign to have 2-digit numbers with 3, 4, etc. We can do it. Or we can use another notation where we can place something like this, that we want a span with the text inside the curly brackets and a $sign, that it should be numerated. And afterwards, we can place the asterisk and the number of the elements we want to get in our structure, just like this. Let's save our file. And you can see the effect on your monitor. As you can see, the span tags inside the code editor, as well as on the website, are placed in one line next to each other. I'll just zoom it a little bit, just so you can see it better. So they are placed next to each other in one line, as the inline element's supposed to. But now let's go to our style tag, create a rule for our span tag, and let's change these elements from inline to block. All we need to do is to refer to the display property. You can see we have many values for this property. You don't need to know them all. Some of them are useful, other won't be even necessary. But for now, we know that our span tags have the inline property. So even if I save it now, nothing really changes, because it's set by default already. But we can change the value to block, changing these elements into the block elements. And now let's see what's gonna happen. Our span tags are now placed one below each other, because now they're a block. Let's check our DevTools. We can see our span tags right here. And we can already see in our DevTools that each of these elements take up the whole line as it comes to its width. And when we change it back to the inline value, like this, we can see its width is clearly automatic, which depends on the text inside. And this is how it's supposed to be by default. But let's go back to the block, like this. Let's give these elements some background color. Like this. And I want to show you something. You can see that the color between those elements is solid. I mean, there are no spaces, no margins between those elements. One element ends, like you can see right here. The other element starts instantly after. Because the block elements usually by default have their margins set to 0. But when we change our block elements back to inline elements, like this, and when they are going to another line, because they are in one line as they supposed to set themselves, but when we get many of those spans placed on our website, now I placed enter in my code editor, which you can see right here. And it's also visible on our website. So let's delete them. Let's try to delete them. Let's see if it works. Let's save our file. Now you can see it worked. But as you can see, when we have a lot of inline elements and they are not fitting into one line, they go to another line automatically. And you can see those little spaces between the lines. And I can assure you, it's not the issue of the margin property or the padding or the border or anything else. If we set everything to 0, those little spaces will appear. And this is one of the issues of the inline elements, which might be very problematic and annoying when creating a website. But there are some tricks and solutions to get rid of that problem. But as I said, we will be talking about it later. But I want to show you that this is another reason for changing the inline element to block element. Because when we go once again to the block, save our file, nothing like this happens. Now every element goes to the new line and we can see no unnecessary and unwanted spaces. Now I want to show you something else. Let's go to our document. As you can see, I only have one span element in my body. So now let's go to the style tag, create a rule for our span element, and let's try to add some styles to it. Let's give it a background color, to cat it blue once again. We can see its height and width is automatic, depending on the text inside. When we give more text to it, it will expand and have bigger width, as well as if we change the font size of it to 20 pixels, for example, it will get higher, even to 40 pixels. As you can see, since the text inside is bigger and requires more space for it, its height is changing automatically. This is how the inline elements behave. But let's delete it for now. Let's delete this text, unnecessary. And let's try to add some other styles to our element. For example, margin property. Let's set it to 100 pixels. Let's see the effect. And we can see that something changed. Let's open our DevTools. Let's check our span element. And what we can see is that margin left and right actually works. But we can see we have no margin bottom and margin top. Because margin top and margin bottom don't work with the inline elements, just as the height and the width property. Let's try to add padding to our element to 30 pixels, for example. And you can see that it seems it works, but you can already see that something's wrong right here. Let's check it out. We can probably see 30 pixels on the left and 30 pixels on the right, but this is a lot of space for a 30 pixels padding. Not mentioning that our element goes beyond the top edge of the browser window and gets occurred somehow. So you can already see that this property behaves strangely. So I'm showing you the issues with working with the inline elements right now. Just for you to keep in mind that inline elements are specific and might be a little bit problematic. Let's try to add a border to our element as well. For example, 10 pixels, solid red. Let's save it. And we can see we have it, but now we can clearly see that our element is not wholly visible on our website. As you may guess, I have it a little bit zoomed, but even if I zoom it out, you can see that our element is somehow moved to the top of the website, and its top edge is not even visible for us. So as you can see, inline elements act really strange, and they are not so easy to control them. So it's another reason to change them to the block elements, just so they could be predictable and so that we could have full control of them. Now I wanted to show you something else. You can see in my document, I have two tags in my body tag. The one is h1 tag with the h1 heading text. The other is the span tag with the span heading text. h1 is a block element, span is an inline element. And now I want to show you how the text inside those tags behave. Let's go to the style tag. Let's create one rule for our h1 tag and a span tag after the comma. And let's check text align property with the center value. Now I want those two elements to have their text centered. Let's save the file and see what happens. Voila. As you can see, the h1 is centered, but the span tag is not centered. So you may guess that you cannot center the text in the inline elements, but that's not true. We will see this when we get a background color for our elements. Candid blue once again, and voila. The block elements have 100% of the width by default, so there's many free space to center our element. So we can center it, align it to the left like this, or to the right like this, because we have a lot of space in which we can center our text or align it however we want. As we can see in the span tag, it has its width set to auto, so it has as much space as it needs. So there's nowhere to center this text because this is the whole element. And this is the only space this text can be. We can't align it to the left or the right or the center because we have no free space in it. What's the solution for this issue? Once again, changing it to the block element with the display property and the block value, because without it, as you may know, as the inline element, we cannot set its width to 100% because it simply don't work with the inline elements. So only solution is to changing it to the block element, and now we can align our text however we want, exactly as you can see. Now let's take a moment to talk about the block elements. What you can see on my monitor right now is that I have two div tags in my body tag, one with the class of rect1, the second one with the class of rect2, and the first one has some dummy text in it, which is visible on the screen. Now let's go to our style tag. Let's create a rule for all our div tags on our website. Let's set its background color to candid blue, like this. We can see the background color of the first div. Of course, we can see the second div because it's empty, so it has 0 width, so it's basically not visible for us. Now, let's create a rule for our first div, like this, and let's set its width to 50%, like this. And you can see we have a full control of this element, and since we didn't set its height, it's get expanded as it needs to. For example, if we place 10% of the width, we can see that its height is getting bigger since it has to display the text inside. But let's keep it 50%. Let's refer to our second div like this. And as we can see, now it's invisible, but we can set its height even if it's empty. And we can say we want it to be 100 pixels height, just like this. As you can see, they're placing themselves one below the other with no margin set. We don't see any space between them. Of course, we can add some space if we want to. For example, setting margin bottom of 50 pixels between our elements, just like this. And now I wanted to show you what happens with the text inside the block elements. Let's copy this text and paste it. Not that. Let's paste it once again and once again. And as I said before, if our width gets smaller, its height has to get bigger to display this text. But what if we set stiff width to, for example, 300 pixels and its height to 100 pixels, like this. As you can see, our text goes over our first div and even occurs the first div. Since it don't have space to place itself, to display itself, it goes beyond. That's its natural behavior, but as you can see, it's only in the appearance layer of the website. It's not destroying the structure of our page. We have a property overflow, and with the value of hidden, we can hide everything that comes beyond our element to not be visible, like this. Now it's hide under our element. Even if it doesn't fit, it's not going beyond it. So when we change our height to, for example, 200 pixels, we are going to see the text that fits 200 pixels. If we uncomment it, the text goes beyond. But this is something that we will discuss later on. For now, we can see that if we set its width and leave the height to auto, the height of the block element will expand automatically to display the text inside. But we have full control to maneuver our element however we want. We can set its width, we can set its height, like this. Let's keep it a little bit smaller, like this. We can add padding to this element, for example, to 30 pixels. Now you can see that our text is separated from the edges of this element by 30 pixels padding right here. We can add a border. Just like this. And we can see that everything works perfectly fine. We don't have any issue as we had with the inline element trying to style it this way. So this is the benefit of working with the block elements, that we have full control of them. And that's why we usually want the inline elements to be transferred to the block elements so we could style them freely. But now let's go back to some theory.